Okay.
Okay. So we are in the middle of something huge, something massive. You know, as of now, COVID-19 pandemic has claimed about 943,000 deaths, yeah, worldwide, from around 30 million cases. 30 million cases. It has gone on for about eight months, yeah, more or less. In Malaysia itself, things are also moving, but Alhamdulillah, slowing down, we can say, but we really don't know where it goes. We have 10,000 cases with 128 deaths, but overall it looks, I mean, day to day it becoming hopefully better in terms of handling. But really, again, we don't know where it goes, and we are still very much in it. What really takes us to this morning's discussion is that this pandemic has led governments, yeah, in major countries, in many countries in this world, to take several measures, which we all know some of those measures are very restrictive, yeah, very drastic, while some others are slowing down their measures, or maybe just trying to do something new from time to time. So countries start to close borders, for example, like in Malaysia, it is really going on, and people for now cannot enter into Malaysia. And even those with valid visas, you know, there are rigorous procedures, yeah. And also countries start to close or to restrict the international exchange, including shippings and so on, yeah. These all, of course, are aimed at protecting the populations by the governments. Interestingly, there is also a growing mistrust between countries, as well as between countries and international institutions. As you see, the complaints, criticism against WHO, for example, or between countries, between superpowers, which add into the whole things. So this may also add to the situation that the nationalistic egoism and egocentrism started to grow. So this takes us to this discussion, and we are already starting to see that we are now working on our own. We are closing borders, and people are asking, where is this free trade? Where is this international interactions? We see them diminishing from time to time. So this takes us to this big question: is this coronavirus signifying the end of globalizations? Because in order to answer this question, there are lots of perspectives, and depending on from where you are coming and on what points you want to highlight, be it trade, business, economics, legal, international law, or maybe social and psychological perspectives. But of course, here today, we might want to focus a little bit on trade law, international trades, as well as globalization issues, having 4 speakers who are law professors, but of course they are going to widen the scope of their discussion to some extent. So we already have the 4 speakers here, as I already mentioned earlier. We will start first with Professor Naqib, yeah, then who is the professor in public international law, and then we will continue then with Professor Stefan Koos, a professor in commercial law from Munich, and then we will next proceed with Dr. Yazid, who is very much active on, his area has been trade law, shipping law, as well as the latest area of cryptocurrency law and terrorism law. And also we have Prof. Bohne next, the last of the speakers, but not the least, who are looking from the human rights perspectives as well as commercial perspective as well. So without further ado, I'd like to start with Professor Naqib. Please go ahead. And if you have any slide, just set up on this and share the screen, please. Thank you.
Sure. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Respected speakers, distinguished participants, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and a very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone, everywhere around the world. Thank you, Dr. Sonny and organizing team for providing us with this opportunity to discuss basically the impact of COVID-19 on globalization. Now I have prepared a few slides, not much, just a few. I would like to share it, but I don't know how. Oh yeah.
There's yeah, we can see it's moving, Prof.
Okay, good. Alhamdulillah.
Great. Yes, we can see it now. Thank you.
You can see it, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So I put a title which sounds very confident that globalization will eventually get through the COVID-19. This is, yes. I don't know how to make this one a little bit.
Prof, you may want to strike on F5, function 5. There is a F5 button.
I don't know how to do that.
Right, no problem. We can actually see it.
You can see it, but it's blocking me. The photos blocking my what you call my slides, so I cannot see.
I understand. What you do is you may want to minimize the panel on the.
Oh, okay. Got it. Now everybody is there.
Yes. Don't worry, we still can see you.
Okay, good. But I can see you is okay. I will see you after. I will see you after this.
Yeah.
Now, as Dr. Sonny mentioned, today there are more than 30 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 worldwide, and about 1 million deaths, touching almost every corner of the world. This shows how serious and how fast this deadly pandemic spreads. When it ends, no one knows. Is it transitory? Maybe. Will it stay with us and we have to live with it? Possible. Would it unravel globalization and multilateral trading system? I doubt. Whatever the possibilities, COVID-19 currently badly impacting on human life. Healthcare sectors, both public and private, free trade, tourism, civil aviation, and freedom of movement, and almost every other aspect of the globalized world. Globalization is a concept that narrowly describes the growing interdependence of the world's economies, cultures, populations, brought about by cross-border trade in goods and services, technology, and flows of investment, people, and information. Unlike COVID-19 pandemic, globalization is not a new phenomenon. It is with us for centuries. Though it gained popularity after the Cold War in the early 1990s, when free trade between nations shaped modern everyday life. However, that modern everyday life is now in jeopardy because of the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown that followed it. The freedom of movement we used to enjoy to travel to other countries for business, education, or just as tourists now is difficult to enjoy due to the global travel restrictions put in place to curtail the COVID-19 pandemic. However, that does not mean we are going to lose that freedom or unable to engage in free trade forever. The temporary restrictive measures adopted by sovereign states are only meant to protect the health of their nations and to alleviate the unprecedented and stressful challenges posed by COVID-19 pandemic on their healthcare sector. Or within these restrictive measures are within the ambit of international trade law because they are taken to address health issues or protect people. Whatever restrictive measures WTO members are taken in response to this pandemic are transparent so far, as the WTO Secretariat is notified about these measures, and the Secretariat published the information on its website. What this means is that the international multilateral trading system is still working amid this deadly pandemic, and this in turn means globalization, though impacted adversely, is pretty alive, waiting for the pandemic to fade away or come under control to revive. Although COVID-19 pandemic adversely affected global economic growth, causing unemployment and raising, as some observers point out, the risk of economic depression, hopefully not with the level of the Great Depression of the 1930s, negatively impacting on international trade, but may not be able to unravel globalization. The First World War and the Second World War did wend and temporarily crushed the trend of globalization, but it managed to survive and revitalize after the war. It may also survive COVID-19 pandemic and certainly revitalize once that pandemic transits, like its predecessors, the 14th century plague, Black Death, and the 1918 Spanish flu. In short, COVID-19 pandemic impacted almost every economic sector and has disrupted the smooth flows of trade that is essential to protect livelihood, and in the process wend the trend of globalization, but it's yet to unravel it. Although the COVID-19 may not succeed to undo globalization, its impact on free trade is undeniable, hitting the world economy the hardest, and even some mega projects like China's Belt and Road Initiative are now not immune from it. On the face of this enormous challenge, what is needed is international cooperation to keep trade flowing, to avoid or minimize protectionist measures, unless for health reasons, to be transparent regarding trade-related policies and actions, and keep supply chains flowing for essential goods. So long as international trade keeps flowing, deglobalization is a remote possibility. Thank you for listening. I finished. I hope everybody
Yeah.
is there.
Yes, 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 still.
I am
Prof.
done. I
Thank
am
you,
done.
Prof.
Alhamdulillah. Yes. You're most welcome.
Right, you may want to switch off the screen sharing. Thank you very much, Professor Naqib, for such an interesting, eye-opening deliberation.
Uh-huh. Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
right.
Okay, good.
Thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
See, you are being expert very instantly, Prof.
I'm learning, yeah.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, learning Zoom might not be as difficult as learning how the globalization works, even though
Works, yeah. Yeah,
it
true.
has been
True.
proven in the past that it gets back despite the crisis. But perhaps we see something unprecedented today, how COVID-19 really affects the world as we have now. The world as we have now, of course, is not the same as the world as they had in the past with such a technologies we have, with such a capabilities and so on. But yet we are still being humbled today. So is this crisis a different crisis? Is it something which really will have more effect into our system? So yes, Prof Naqib has his opinion and deliberation. Thank you. Now if you have any audience have any questions, you may want to reserve it first, and we will have it towards the end after all the speakers finish. Yeah, now we move to the second speaker. I shall welcome Professor Stefan Koos from Munich, Germany.
Yes. Hello. Good morning, everyone. Just give me short time to start the presentation. Well, yeah, my thesis, my postulate is a little bit more pessimistic on one side and more optimistic on the other side. Let me maybe start with my postulates. I'm already before the pandemic was of the opinion that we have a crisis of international law and we have a crisis of the global trade law. I will tell you why. On the other side, I think we have in the pandemic a catalysator, both for negative aspects, what I mentioned before, I will tell you about that. And second, catalysator, maybe to find, to strengthen new ways of local initiatives, like paradiplomacy and several different things, to correct certain issues of the globalization, which may be not positive. Let me start with, this is just a collection of factors I would like to mention with social, technological, and economical conditions of the recent area. First, before the pandemic, we have, first of all, a growing part of the economy is dominated by ubiquity aspects. Yeah, so we have a turn away from classical territorial aspects, which were dominant in the 19th and also in the biggest part of the 20th century, to ubiquity aspects, which is actually helping globalization, because we have a factual globalization with that. We see a lot of aspects of the recent economy, which is in the internet, which is not be controlled by states, at least if states not take our authoritarian measurements. In liberal states, we cannot control a lot of things. So this is one very important factor for globalization, ubiquity instead of territoriality. And on the same time, on the same hand, this is also the main factor for what I mentioned, the crisis of international law, because we cannot in national area very good control certain issues which influence our state territory. Second, very interesting point and very important point, not so much legally, but politically, we have a tendency of, in all countries of the world, including also the European countries, especially certain European countries, in Germany maybe less, in France or Netherlands maybe stronger, and in the United States very strong, active populism and passive populism. So we have the tendency that a big part of the population is not anymore, and this is expressed more positive than it actually is not anymore understanding political issues anymore. Why globalization may be positive, yeah, and why nationalism on the long term in the nowadays recent area is not a solution for the problems we have to face. And politicians addressing this populism. Then we have the longing for territorialization. This is connected to this aspect. We have the negation of globalism and international cooperation and the rise of nationalism. We see that with the measurements of President Trump. And this is an aspect which is not starting in the pandemic. If we think about leaving the World Health Organization or whatever, it is already longer. It's already before Trump starting. That the institutions of the dispute settlement body of the WTO is more and more without power due to certain politics of strong blocs, not to accept decisions or even to make the court, the body, not workable anymore by not naming or not electing judges and so on and so on. This is a problem which is already before the pandemic. We have the popularization of the economy. This is maybe a side aspect, and we have, and this is very important also, because it leads to a factual globalization even in the pandemic, and especially in the pandemic, we have new and disruptive technologies. Let me come to. Hello.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Let me come to this is just to try to systemize it a little bit. We see here the factors. Let me start with the factor of the internet-based interference in national politics and private rights of the citizens. I talk about especially about data protection issue and the use of artificial intelligence, especially data protection issues. We have here actually an argument I call it pro-globalization, but actually it's an argument which is making globalization factual or legally stronger. And we have the tendency to globalize the economy with these new technologies because we have, due to the ubiquity of these factors, a limited national control. If there is limited national control, the states can, of course, decide against being favorable for globalization, but it will not work because the globalization will be forced coming to the territories of the states as long as the states don't close up their markets and their territories. But this leads, of course, to negative aspects of this globalization, because this is, let's say, anarchic globalization. It leads to the law of the strongest. We see that we can see that in the reality of, especially in my area, we see influence of the internet and Facebook and social media and so on, which may be not favorable for us in our legislation. And we see it also in certain issues between Trump and China. We have the law of the strongest in this case. It means the law systems and the political ideas of weaker states will not dominate in this race, but factually the law of the strongest blocs will have the power and will have the chance to dominate here. The blocs like European Union, United States, and China, factually. This leads also to an argument pro-globalization because it leads to the need of conflict, international conflict cooperative solutions. On the other side, this limitation of the influence is also an argument against the globalization because especially in a populist surrounding, the population could argue, or politicians could argue, we must stop globalization because we have a lot of negative impacts of other areas, of other states to our market and to our area, which is undermining our legislation power and our political ideas. And a more positive or more optimistic view would be we have a shift from the power of the states to the power of the netizens, because the states lose power, the legislative power is weak because of this ubiquity. We can anyway not do anything. So why not let netizens, and with netizens I also mean companies which do that, why not let the private sector doing it and let it regulate? Yeah, but in fact this is not, will not work. In fact, we have a shift again to the stronger countries in the world who have the factual market power to force the others to follow their regulations internationally. The second aspect is the shift from, and this is very interesting, this is really a new idea from me, because I have from a master work of one of my students. We have a shift from material production, which is belonging to the old territorial-based economy, to intellectual creation of goods. This is a little bit utopic, yeah. But if we see the technology, the growing technology of the 3D print, then we can imagine that maybe in the future, a part of the products we still order from China, from countries where they produce this in body, this producing of goods will not be the important thing in the value chain. The important thing in the value chain will be the creation of the plans, how the 3D printer will do it, and then the people will maybe print it at home. So we will have a shift to the own production, at least to the national production, but even to the private production. The people will have these printers, and I can imagine we have a program like Amazon or Alibaba is just delivering these printers and for free, and then the people can print it, but the people pay for the plans they get for printing the product. This is of course utopic, but it is a little bit showing what I'm talking of. There is clearly seen a significant percentage of the product of the value chain shifting to the intellectual creation of the goods, and intellectual creation of the goods is ubiquity. It is not based on territory. So this is actually a factor of globalization, because it shows that the old economy, which is based on fabrics in certain territories, is maybe not that important anymore. So if we see about this discussion of Trump bring the production, bring the industry back to the States, this may be one part, but maybe it is not a big part. It's not this big part. This is actually optimistic. I agree with my colleague before, because actually this says, even if they say make it America, bring it home and make renationalization of the industry, this is maybe not the biggest part of the globalization. Maybe it will not stop the globalization, because this part of the market is not so important. The same happens to performance-based contracting. Performance-based contracting is a really new issue. I think we have this issue that people that companies maybe not buy the parts for an end product, but they buy a solution, including the guarantee that this part will lead to a surplus of income in the end company. So if Airbus, for example, if Lufthansa, for example, orders with Airbus aircraft and Airbus orders the jet streams, then it is possible that the jet streams, the jet stream supplier has to also make sure that there is an impact, and the impact in the income of Lufthansa in the end, of the clients in the end, will also determine the payment for it. This leads to a transfer of know-how to other parts of the supply chain. This is also bringing a globalization effect. And third, we have, of course, this is an old factor, less national limited product markets and more global product markets. This is not a new aspect. Let me go to the next slide so that I'm not getting too long. What we have now, if we compare that now with the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, then we see what you already mentioned before. the closing of borders and international exchange, and that means especially not only international exchange of states, but for me very important is the private sector, the sector of the individuals internationally, because we all know there is this antagonism between the idea that traveling too much with aircraft is not good for the atmosphere, is not good for the nature. Let's go back and let's go more local and so on and so on. But on the other side, this traveling exactly leads to our situation, leads to exchange of culture, leads to more understanding of culture, and it would be devastating for the global society if people would not travel anymore. Yeah, this is very, very important. We have this mistrust against international institutions, which was already, because factually we can observe that certain blocs like China or United States were not following certain rules of the WTO if it was not favorable for their ideas. We can observe that before, but the mistrust now it's on the topic of the world. So it's really mentioned now. We mistrust these institutions, especially from the United States in the moment. This may be a temporary sector. We don't know. We will see. But it destroyed, in my opinion, already a lot of the trust to these international institutions, not only to the UN institutions, but also to the WTO. And the same happens to the mutual mistrust between nations. Of course, there is this famous saying, states have no friends, states have partners. Yeah? Of course, there were no friends in the international politics, but we have it now on the sheet of the world discussion, that there is a clear confrontation, political confrontation between blocs, especially now the new bloc, People's Republic of China, United States, which is growing maybe to a conflict like we had it in the Cold War. Russia is not that important economically anymore, so Russia is maybe not have this importance. This is now China, but this is of course not favorable for the globalization. We have national egoism. This is pessimistic. This is negative mention, national egoism, especially the race for vaccines. We have the phenomenon that certain blocs try to open this, especially if they collaborate with NGOs or with companies or with philanthropes like Bill Gates, which I think it's a very good initiative, even if there is, of course, this conspiracy, the ideas, which is, in my opinion, totally nonsense. But on the other side, we have this idea that we have that issue that United States try to buy, also in national production, to buy the vaccines for the future, to get the vaccines first for their own population. On the other side, this is the purpose of the politic of the government in the old territorial idea. Yeah, the old territorial idea and the old sovereignty idea is, let's protect our own population before other populations. And this is an important point, because on one side, from the populist side, this is mentioned as a positive aspect. Let's say in the discussion, is Trump good or is Trump not good? The fans of Trump always used to say, yeah, but Trump does something for his own population. On one side, we think our government should do something first of all for us, for ourselves. But this is not a very modern idea. A modern idea is that we get advantage from mutual support and get advantage from international support. And my idea always was, we must find to a certain globalized economical concept. So in the antitrust law, for example, we should not only see our own national limited market, which is anyway not a reality, but we should see more the mutual impact, also the international impact, which comes back to us like a boomerang if we not have also into account the regulation of the market of other parts of the world. And so in my opinion, there is always a certain protection of the own population. We cannot avoid it. That is, of course, part of the politic of the national inner politic, but the inner politic should be more internationally responsible. So to come to the end, do we have a tendency back to re-territorialization, which is the pessimistic view, or is it rather on the long term especially after certain elections in the world? Is it more a strengthening of regionalism as a correction of certain negative developments of globalization? Because I'm also, as a globalist, I'm of the idea that in the future, it cannot be that in the next pandemic in Germany, which is a high sophisticated, technologized country, cannot produce masks. Yeah, that we are dependent of China to get masks in a big amount for our population. Yeah, so this is maybe a factor of the industry which is not important, because we don't make much money, because it's not high sophisticated with that. But we should, in this way, we should re-territorialize a part of our economy, because this is a part of the protection of the population. So we must be able to have these products at least. We cannot be dependent on certain products from India, and then in the end we cannot even produce our nose sprays, yeah, because there is certain plastic product we need for this pump sprays. This cannot be. So these essential products must be able to be produced in the country. And very interesting new aspect, and this is a new project I have with Venus, with political science in Venus, international relations in Venus, the trend to paradiplomacy. This is a positive trend. So the less the state has the power to control things, the more the shift could maybe be to a certain level which is under the state level, a cooperation between not only NGOs, also between Masyarakat, cities, people's groups, and so on and so on. This should be, in my opinion, internationally supported and also by the law supported, and it should be identified in which areas, in which aspects we can strengthen this tendency to paradiplomacy, because this is a mutual aspect of interchange, which is very favorable for real globalization, which is also involving the people. Thank you very much. This was a little bit shorter than my presentation in the slides. You can read the factors more carefully later in the slides. I'm ready with my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof. Stefan, for such a provoking news. We do get a lot of insights from your presentation as well. And you were saying you were yourself a globalist, but now in between, yeah, optimist and pessimist to some extent. It really makes us having some mixed feeling. But that is really leading to queries and questions for us to go and move forward in these discussions. But just before you throw any questions to Prof. Stefan and Prof. Naqib, inshallah we'll do that after we hear from the other two speakers. So now let me invite the third speaker, who is Assistant Professor Dr. Muhammad Yazid Zulkifli. He is an assistant professor in the Faculty of Law, International Islamic University, Malaysia, IIUM. My colleague, yeah. Happy to have a colleague like him, very progressive. Dr. Yazid has been teaching on shipping law, trade law, and international terrorism as well, part of his area. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Yazid, please.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Sonny. First, let me share the screen.
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Okay, can you all see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good morning to everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Dr. Muhammad Yazid Zulkifli. My email address is maritime@ium.edu.my. So if you have any further inquiries after this, you can also email me at my email address, maritime@ium.edu.my. Okay, the topic of my presentation is on COVID-19, globalization, online shopping, and the economy. Okay, first we must take note that we are living in a very globalized world. Most of our products are coming from China. Let us have a look at the top 10 countries by share of global manufacturing output in 2018. The highest one is China. China is the main manufacturer, the main global manufacturer for the world, followed by United States, Japan, Germany, South Korea, India, Italy, France, United Kingdom, and Mexico. Most of the product, as seen before, are made in China. Even if you travel to Malaysia, when you buy souvenir, most of the time the souvenirs are still made in China. The same goes to other countries. Even if you go to Europe and you buy souvenirs, things like this, most of the items were made in China. So for example, 49% of United States toys made in China. 70% of work umbrellas made in China. 72% of United States shoes made in China. 60% of works buttons, and also United States Christmas light, 85% of them made in China. Okay, let us look a little bit at the effect of this COVID-19 to online trading and all that. We have seen before that most of the items, many of the items were made in China. Okay, let us look at some of the recent implications. One we can see is changing attitude. Okay, when we talk about internet sales as a total percentage of sales in the United Kingdom, for example, jumped from 2.8% in November 2006 to 18.9%, around 20%, in February to 2020. And then shut up again to 30% in April 2020 because of the pandemic. So we can see a major increase when it comes to online shopping. In Malaysia, Shopee was found to be the top platform for online purchase during the lockdown, with GrabFood coming in second, and Lazada a close third. When it comes to purchase on social media platform, Facebook and Instagram were the kings. Okay, one of the important things that we need to take note about COVID-19, shopping and all is about the safety aspect. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, there is likely very low risk of spread from products or packaging that are shipped over a period of days or weeks at ambient temperatures. One of the reasons why we are still having this online shopping and all is because of the safety aspect. Overall, there is no evidence to show that COVID-19 spread using online shipping and all that. This is because there's likely very low risk of spread from product because this product take a period of days or weeks. But we need to reconsider this matter. If in the future, certain group, for example, terrorist group, they manage to weaponize the virus and they modify the virus or weaponize the virus to make sure that the virus are able to survive for a few days, that will change everything. To a certain extent, that will basically be very, very bad for globalization. If terrorist group manage to weaponize the virus. Okay, health and safety products. According to data from Nielsen, items like hygienic and medical masks sales are up by more than 300%. This is not surprising. Okay, about online shopping, some people say this is not really shopping. This is actually therapy. They say this is actually retail therapy. Instead of going to find your secretaries and all, you just go for retail therapy. Another word for shopping. So my wife, she never went shopping. She just went for retail therapy. Okay, retail therapy is shopping with the primary purpose of improving the buyer's mood or disposition, often seen in people during periods of depression or stress. It is normally a short-lived habit. Items purchased during periods of retail therapy are sometimes referred to as comfort buys. But once you get the credit card statement, that will not be so comfortable. Okay, that will not be so comfortable once you get the credit card statement. Okay, another thing that we can see is panic buying and hoarding. We can see this when we talk about potential of lockdown. When we talk about lockdown, we can see panic buying and hoarding. Paul Marsden, a consumer psychologist at the University of the Arts, London, was quoted by CNBC as saying, panic buying can be understood as playing to our three fundamental psychology needs. These needs are, the first one is autonomy, or the need to feel in control of your action. Second, relatedness, the need to feel that we are doing something to benefit our families. And competence, the need to feel like smart shoppers making the correct choice. These are some of the reasons. Okay, panic buying and hoarding. People have greater instinct to over rather than under prepare. So we can see in news, in YouTube, people fighting over ridiculous items like toilet paper. Can you imagine people fighting each other just because they want to hoard toilet paper? How much toilet paper do you need? But we can see this in the news. Because of this COVID, I'm going to fight for my toilet paper. Okay, one interesting issue is whether the effect of panic buying and its relation to online shopping, for example. Because there are also reports that panic buying reduce or unwane as online shopping takes over, says bank. Because when we talk about panic buying, there's a differences between online shopping and actually going to the market. When you go to the market, you look at everyone, they are rushing and they are all buying the toilet paper, for example. So there's something in your heart that say, oh, I must rush and get this as well. But you cannot see the same thing when you go for online shopping. For online shopping, the element of panic buying is not really there compared to physical or normal shopping. Another thing is we need to take note of crowd mentality. Seeing other people buying up the shelf and then seeing a scarcity of necessary product validates the decision to stock up. Okay, about online shopping, we need to take note that sometimes this also lead to the creation of new jobs and opportunities. In August 2020, it was reported that Tesco, United Kingdom, will create 16,000 new permanent jobs after lockdown. After lockdown led to exceptional growth in its online business. The new post will include 10,000 staff to pick customer orders from shelf and 3,000 delivery drivers. Before the pandemic, around 9% of Tesco sales were online. Now online sales amount to 16% of sales. So we can see an increase of online sales, and as a result, there's new job and opportunities in this aspect. We can also see different attitude between generation when we talk about online shopping. 24% of boomers and 34% of Generation X said they were letting current event impact what items they purchase. So this COVID impact the items that boomers and Generation X purchase compared to nearly half of the millennial. So it affects the millennial purchasing habit more compared to the previous generation. Okay, just a little bit. Okay, Generation X, baby boomer. They care, this is just a stereotype by the way, don't just believe the 100%. They care more about health, wealth, quality. And then we have the Generation X, they are anti-social, not anti-social, they are more anti, okay? More rebellious, always busy and cynical. And then we have Generation Y, they have grown up with technology, those born from 1980 to 1996. So I guess I fall under Generation Y. What about you, Dr. Sonny?
Neman, I'll reserve my
Okay,
assessment.
you reserve your age. And then we have Generation Z, basically the millennials, they are basically born digital. Okay, they are born digital. And the meaning is they are very well versed with technology. Okay, let us look a little bit at the implication of COVID to economy. First, not surprisingly, we can see global shares in flux. The FTSE, Dow Jones Industrial Average, and Nikkei all saw huge falls as the number of COVID-19 cases grew. In response, central banks in many countries, including UK, slashed interest rates that should, in theory, make borrowing cheaper and encourage spending to boost the economy. And then we can also see unemployment. Unemployment rates have increased across major economies as a result of COVID-19. For example, in the United States, the proportion of people out of work has hit 10.4%, according to the IMF, signaling an end to a decade of expansion for one of the world's largest economy. And then recession. The IMF says that the global economy will shrink by 3% this year. It described the decline as the worst since the Great Depression of the 1930s. South Asia is likely to be the worst affected, while China is bucking the trend. India's economy is expected to contract 9% this year, while China's growth is forecast at 1.8%. Southeast Asia is likely to see a drop of almost 4%. Okay, there's a major impact on the tourism industry. Who's most vulnerable to COVID-19 impact on tourism? We can look at the total contribution of travel and tourism to the GDP of selected countries last year in 2019. Spain, the GDP, the tourism contributed 14.3% to tourism, followed by Italy, China, Germany, United Kingdom, United States, France, and also Iran. So this country is more affected with COVID-19 due to the problem related to tourism. Okay, let us now look at the impact to shipping, which is the final part of my presentation. In the center of COVID-19 have been the world's 1.6 million seafarers on 50,000 tankers and cargo carriers. Many of them are unable to leave their ships or find themselves stuck in hotels without pays and unable to get flights home. Every month, 100,000 merchant mariners come to the end of their contracts on their ship and need to be flown home. But the pandemic has halted this. We must take note that one of the reasons why we have our modern life is because of globalization, because of international trade. Most of the items that we have even in our kitchen are not locally produced. We get all this product at a very good price because of globalization, because of international trade. We owe all this to the seafarers as well. Another thing is loss of profit. The shipping industry has not yet had to lower price. But if shipping firms are forced to do so and freight rates fall by 20%, as they did after the 2008 financial crisis, and were shipping volumes to remain 10% lower, we could see operating loss of some 20 to 23 billion. That would wipe out the shipping firms' last 8 years worth of profit. So the impact to the shipping industry is very big. Okay, last about digitization. The COVID-19 pandemic has pushed the logistic industry to reconsider, to reevaluate, and re-strategize its operation towards digitalization. In Malaysia, the Malaysian Investment Development Authority said the move has boosted productivity and enhanced business flow, both of which are fundamental for business sustainability. During the implementation of the lockdown of the movement control order, the logistic industry, particularly the e-commerce and e-fulfillment service, were declared as essential services and allowed to operate. So MIDA said this was an important move, a vital move, as consumers had turned to online platform to shop during the MCO. So everything is related, online shopping, international trade. Okay, that's one thing to think about before I end today's presentation. Okay, now we have this COVID-19. So we have this major economic problem and all. But at the same time, we have something unexpected. We have a big war between two very big nations, between the United States and China. So while we are trying to formulate a policy to help the global economy, at the same time, we are facing a trade war between US and China, and we will see later the effect of this trade war to attempt to revive the global economy. That will be all from my part. Hope it's useful. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Yazid. with such a rich and wide scope of the explanation of the topic, ranging from shipping law to digital law and terrorism law. A lot of things are actually being impacted with this COVID-19 crisis. That's why we have a lot actually to say, and hopefully we have also a lot to discuss, and we are looking forward for queries. So before I proceed with the next speaker, I'd like to inform to all respective audience and participants, welcome for those who have just joined. If you have any question in advance, you may want to write it down in the chat room. We will try our best to look into each and every one of it. Or otherwise, we will have about some time, inshallah, good time enough to discuss, yeah, after the last speaker. Another announcement is that I'm going to provide you with a link of a Google Form link, or Google Form document, sorry, for any of you who wishes to obtain an e-certificate of attendance or of participation of this webinar. Yeah, so we will be soon providing you with the link on the chat room. Just watch out, and if it is there, so just go to that form and fill it up. Thank you. So thank you again, Dr. Yazid. I'd like to move to the last speaker of the day, Professor Michael Bohne from Dortmund University in Germany. So we'd like to welcome you and looking forward to seeing your presentation.
Yes, good morning to everybody. Hopefully you can hear me. Sonny,
yeah,
very nice,
very clear.
Very nice to meet you again. Thank you for the cooperation. That's really great for us to get this impression. And I already talked to a student from Dortmund who joined us every time, and he also said that's very interesting for him, especially to get an impression of the influence it has on so many countries around the world. Just to sum up a little bit what we discussed before, so I don't need so much time to do so, it is to bring in something already Stefan was talking about. It is about the relation between Corona, globalization, but also what is the influence on fundamental rights and economy. Most we talked about the economy during this time, but now it comes also to the question whether the Corona crisis leads to a more restrictive way to deal with fundamental rights, or whether it comes to a new way to look at fundamental rights and even to increase their impact. And you see, this is also a question between China and the European Union, or the European attitude towards democracy, that probably the crisis is now also a chance to come to a new look at fundamental rights, and or even to increase their meaning. Okay. Just to give you an example, how far the fundamental rights are limited during the Corona crisis, and also in international law. You can see it in the German foreign trade law, which are used quite often during the Corona pandemic. Normally, this restriction, you can see in section 4, is not used very much, because it is really a strong restriction of the economy, and especially of the principle of the free trade. You can see this is here a restriction in order to protect public security and external interests. So it is a very broad paragraph section where you can justify nearly everything. And you can see it under number 5. You can have a restriction on legal transactions and actions to counteract a danger to the coverage of vital needs in Germany or in parts of Germany, and thereby to protect the health and life of human beings in accordance with Article 36 of the European treaties. You see, here you have a restriction of free trade in the foreign trade law of Germany, and that means that under the cover of health and life protection, you can justify nearly everything, because there are not real limitations to it. So you have to find other ways to limit the scope of this section 4. So it means that we have to look that the crisis is not abused to introduce restrictions and to increase the influence of the state more than necessary. As Stefan already said, we have the use of the crisis to renationalize trade in order to achieve short-term success with the population, as you can see in the United States. So my thesis is that only the strengthening of fundamental rights can lead to a limitation of such state influence, and thus would strengthen the fair trade and the free trade. You see, there's one example how the economic freedom can be restricted during such crisis. The German government made it more difficult for unwanted investors to take over companies from the health sector, because that's what they realized at the beginning of the crisis, that they don't have enough masks. I mean, we are able to produce this, to produce the best cars in the world, just to say it. Not to argue against the Proton, of course, but nevertheless, the German cars are a little bit better than the Proton at the moment. It will change in the future, probably. At the moment, we can produce very good cars. Nevertheless, we are not able to produce very good masks because we hadn't enough at the beginning. So it was really a battle in the European Union who get the mask and who is able to fill this gap. So they introduced some restrictions how to organize it in the future, and that should even to come to a renationalization of industries, that now you try again to produce masks in Germany or in Europe, even when it is too expensive to do so, and when it can be better done by China, for example. So this is a very good example how you can abuse a crisis to introduce restrictions, because this is very easy in this way. They just included it into the list of companies with particular security relevance. You can say, okay, mask production is a security reason, that's why we introduce it into this list, and then we can limit the international free trade. And as we know, Sonny, every time when a state puts restriction on economy, it is very difficult, not only on the economy, but also on people. It is always very difficult to change it in the future. It's normally easier to put burdens on people and to put burdens on fundamental rights than to put them away in the future, because states have always the tendency to restrict freedom. Even in a democratic society, it is a restriction. And you see the measures they took during the crisis, even on a legal fundament, as you can see in section 4 of the Free Trade Act in Germany. So we must be really careful to come to less restrictions and to come to a way to strike a fair balance between different fundamental rights. I mean, this is the normal methodology we have in the description of fundamental rights, that you have always a restriction and you have always to strike a balance between different fundamental rights. But that means, for example, that the health of the population can't justify every limitation. So this is not an argument with which you can justify every limit of fair trade. Another example is, for example, the Protection Against Infection Act in Germany. You have in section 16 general measures which can be introduced by the competent authority. And a competent authority means that it is an authority on a regional level. You have such authorities even in small cities. And they are allowed to restrict fundamental rights, because as you can read in section 16, paragraph 1, if circumstances are observed which could lead to the outbreak of a communicable disease, or if it can be assumed that such circumstances exist, the competent authority shall take the measures necessary to avert the danger. And this means that these authorities can even introduce the limitation of fundamental rights. Of course, you have the way to go to courts in order to fight against it, and you have also other measures to come to a balance between the measures of such authorities and to the outcome, of course. But nevertheless, you have such regulations. The competent authority shall take the measures necessary. Where are the limitation of it? What does it mean? You know, especially in Germany, we have really bad experiences from the past. What can happen with such general clauses? When you have a general clause that they can do basically everything it needs to solve a problem. That means even during a pandemic, you have to take the effort to have a clear balance of fundamental rights, especially what does it mean toward the restriction of freedom of movement. Of course, it could be necessary that you have such a restriction, but you need a justification for it, and you need a justification for it at the beginning and during the whole phase of the pandemic. That means that you have to prove it constantly, whether such limitation, such encroachment is necessary. So, and it is always the question also, how far are you allowed to restrict the freedom of profession? That is one point of globalization, that people are allowed to work in other countries or to trade with other countries in general. And of course, such measures to restrict the freedom of movement is also a restriction of the free flow of goods, of free trade. So that means, that leads to the consequence that every time when we come to the question how to strike this balance and how to protect fundamental rights as far as possible, we have to ask some questions. First of all, what should the measurement achieve? Is it really necessary? So it means you have to look at the situation, even at the moment. Of course, we are still in the corona pandemic. Nevertheless, it could be that there are milder measures are appropriate at the moment, and that you have to loosen some measurements, which would also mean that you can strengthen it, or you must strengthen it. And then the second question should always be, is it suitable to achieve the goal? Is it really necessary, and is it suitable? Is it necessary, or are there milder means to achieve such goal? So you must be creative as a state and also as a population. how to solve such problems. And you can see it in the discussion in Europe, when you see on the one hand the Swedish way, on the other hand the very strict way in Germany and other countries. It's not clear which way is better at the end. We will have this decision at the end of the pandemic, which was the better way. In Germany, the Minister for Health said, at the end of the pandemic, we have the necessity to excuse ourselves to very many people. So because during a pandemic, you not really know what to do, even especially when there's a new situation. But it also means at the end, or even during the pandemic, you have to constantly prove whether it is necessary to restrict fundamental right, and in the measure worthwhile. Worthwhile, not worthwhile, worthwhile. That means we have it in Germany, you have it also when you look in the older people's houses, that they are restricted to have contact to their relatives, that some of them, I mean, imagine you are 95, Sonny, and you are restricted from your family to visit them or to be visited by them. It means probably you have only half a year to live anymore. And you are half a year in the lockdown. Probably you should have the fundamental right to decide whether you take the risk to get COVID-19 or to stay alone and to die alone, probably, because you have only a few time. Okay, that means in the end, only restrictions with narrow limits and for a limited period can be justified, because otherwise it leads to the consequences Stefan already talked about. It means, on the one hand, Corona leads to an increase in the global economy and the digital economy, mostly. So there will be globalization, but not probably as it was in the past for the oil economy. And the restrictions on fundamental rights primarily affect those who do not benefit from globalization. I mean, this is the point with Trump, that what he's doing is not for the benefit of the people who vote for him. And only an expansion of the protection of fundamental rights will lead to general participation in the economy. And that means more globalization. And this is exactly the contrary what is China doing most of the time. And we will see which concept will prevail in the future. Thank you very much, friends. Thank you very much, Sonny. I'm really looking forward for the discussion.
Thank you, Prof. Bohne, and such an interesting discussion that you have come from that perspective of fundamental rights, which we did not really look into from the first or first few speakers, but I believe your topic or your discussion really complements and completes the whole view of how complicated it is, the situation when it comes to the pandemic vis-a-vis the globalization. Thank you again for such a beautiful presentation. Thank you everyone for being or for staying with us at this moment so far. Alhamdulillah, we have quite a good number of participation, and in fact some few are coming. I rather let them join regardless of the time. Okay. We like to welcome now question and answers from questions and discussions, or maybe comments from the participants. And for everyone's information, we are happy to note today's audience spans from few countries already: Malaysia, Indonesia, Brunei, Germany, and I believe few other countries which I don't really recognize, but some are from other countries which I didn't mention. So good audience, alhamdulillah. So I'd like to welcome discussions now. I better start with Prof. Ida because she already asked to ask questions. Later on, if there is no more question, then I will do my part. So I'd like to welcome Prof. Ida, the Dean of Center of Postgraduate Students in IIUM and also Professor in Law Faculty in IIUM. Please welcome.
Thank you very much. I actually wanted to allow the others to raise issues first, but since I'm invited, it's always nice to be here together with Prof. Bohne and Prof. Stefan Koos. And of course, I also enjoyed the discussion by Naqib and Yazid. Now, I want to be controversial. I think globalization is dead because of the pandemic. If you look at the measures given by, imposed by national countries, either in terms of closing the borders, restriction in terms of movement of people, movement of goods. There's also imposition of reduction of tariffs for essential medicines, and some measures in terms of simplifying standards as far as medical goods are concerned. This all goes against the normal norms in free trade agreements, whether you like it or not, right, Naqib? If you remember, WTO rules is so much based on freedom of movement of goods and freedom of movement of people, and this has somehow been affected significantly because of COVID-19. But what is most unfortunate is the fact that if you go through, like my recent presentation with North Borneo Tarakan, is I went through the free trade agreements, provisions, as well as some of the multilateral agreements, is that health does not play a very significant role. Health is not given a primary consideration when you talk about trade. Health is always given or treated as a concession rather than the primary objectives. So you see the safeguard measures under Article 20B, plus even under IP treaties, health is always a concession. Whenever there is emergency, then you can, override the existing trade rules. So if you look at the notification that has been given by member countries to WTO, there are a number of notifications already on how the existing trade rules has been flouted, because of COVID-19. So we suspect that now, because everybody's in crisis, countries are in crisis, so they are not raising this issue so much, but later when pandemic is over, there'll be a lot of disputes among countries, especially how trade rules have been flouted in this COVID-19. But most importantly, it is disappointing that countries are not rushing to come up with agreement that put health as a priority, even though now we know with COVID-19, without health there is no trade. So in the future, we have to relook at how we, draft trade agreements and make more emphasis on trade. Because even though some agreements have provisions on economic cooperation in certain fields, again, health is not necessarily one of the areas that countries collaborate. And this is important because with COVID-19, we need to have more collaboration. And the third point is that if you look at how countries race to develop vaccine, and I like what Stefan Koos mentioned, nationalism, there's a word for it, right? Vaccine hoarding. You see how US behave in buying all the stocks of remdesivir, it leads to the law of the strongest. Whether you like it or not, we are back to nationalism, because if you want to protect your country, you have to resort to national measures. You need to have money, and it's all nationalist. There is very lack of hard norms where countries are mandated to cooperate with each other when facing pandemics, and share essential supplies of medicines and vaccines. When we when we face pandemics, and we still wonder which country will get supplies of those vaccines. Although some countries already mentioned they're going to supply to their citizens, and it's really, really worrying. The fourth point is that you can see how the normal international, the normal IP rules are no longer relevant. People are not talking about, how science is for public good, even if those multinational companies were to develop vaccine, and it has to be distributed to all. And if you look at WHO reports, there are now 10 vaccines under clinical trial, 4 from China, 3 from US, and 1 from Oxford. Now, these are the countries that you have to be nice with now, that if you want to have access to those essential medicines, because there's no, legal rules that say, these countries have to share with the rest of the world. It's always the law of the strongest that is into play now. So my questions to Naqib: will you foresee a lot of disputes being brought to WTO dispute settlement body on the offending of free trade rules? And to Stefan Koos, for example, don't you think that all this, what pandemic has shown us, is actually all this move towards trade and trade and trade is no longer sustainable? We have to put health as a priority, and we have to really work together and come up with trade rules that, mandates cooperation and mandatory sharing of essential medicines, because in pandemic, even if you settle the pandemic in your country, you are not safe because the rest of the world is still having problem with the pandemic. So it has to be at a global level. Right, I will start with those 2 questions first. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Ida. Shall we invite the comment to that question?
Okay.
Yeah, please.
Can I start, Dr. Sonny?
Yes,
Can I answer Ida's question?
Yes, please.
Yes, Prof, I think Prof. Ida is an expert in the area of WTO and IP laws and other aspects of WTO. After hearing her comment on the issue, I do agree that there will be a lot of disputes that would be brought before WTO dispute settlement after COVID-19 is over. I have no doubt about it. Of course, the reasons for that, Prof. Ida did explain, and I don't want to go and explain that again. But let me to make a remark here that I love the statement made by Prof. Stefan that states have no friends but partners. I would love to use it in one of my writing if he has no objection with that, because I am in the midst of addressing...
It's not mine. It's not my idea. This is a citation, but I don't know from whom. I think it's from Churchill, but I'm not sure.
But it's a beautiful statement. Why I mentioned that one? Because partners sometimes do dispute or mistrust each other. Mutual mistrust between nations existed long before the COVID-19 come into being. The dispute or the mistrust that exists between United States of America and Russia, United States of America and China are not new. They are very old issues. as regard to the institutions, mistrust against international institutions, yeah, that is very true. That is very true, but that is again not new. That I doubt if it is the impact of the COVID-19. The mistrust exists among the UN members. Between members and the UN, it is not something new. It exists among WTO members, and also it exists in other international institutions. Now, territorializing economy, of course, is something good for the locally produced goods, but that would be at the expense of competition. But that would be at the expense of free trade. But that would be at the expense of. But that would increase monopoly of goods, right, in the market, and that would also certainly affect consumers. And then also, if we were to territorialize economy, what would happen to foreign direct investment? What would happen if the foreign investors, take their goods and invest it in their own countries? What would happen to the employment sector? So many people would lose their job, right? So I'm trying to make some senses, but these are the old issues, I believe. I hope I have answered Prof. Ida's question.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Naqib. Now, yeah, Prof. Stefan, your comment to Prof. Ida, please. Please unmute yourself.
I'm sorry. Yeah, maybe first I can refer to you, Professor Naqib. It is very interesting just to mention that the population, the people think, yeah, there is alliances and there is enemies. Even this is not true. If we see the Cold War, then maybe you know that Germany had best relation with Soviet Union. So that Germany was on the list of the COCOM of United States for supercomputers. So we did not get that because the US was afraid that we give it to the German Democratic Republic and to the Russians, and we have excellent relation. On the other side, we see now that we cannot trust our ally United States, which is maybe far from us, and maybe in certain aspects Russia or China. Yeah. So this is very true, and this is not a pandemic question. So let me answer your point, Prof. Ida. First of all, if I would not say there is an antagonism between trade and health protection. So I'm a fan of the idea that if you want to develop something which is also good for the population and also good for the health protection of the population, then we need always incentives. So incentives are economic. This is one point. But on the other side, we have economic systems which are pure market related, pure economic related, pure incentive related, and we have economic systems which are corrected by a social idea. So in Germany, for example, in our constitution, we are not a market economy, free market economy like United States, and we don't have this tendency to bring back the state influence in favor of the economy and of the freedom of the people, and the people should care for themselves all, and so on and so on. So we have the duty of the state to correct certain aspects of the market economy by a social duty of the state. So the state will influence. Americans would say this is socialism. we don't see that as socialism. We are, of course, not a socialist country. So in my opinion, there is no ambivalence, but I agree that this solidarity in the health collaboration, international, to develop certain, not only in the pandemic, also in others. Let's think about hunger, or let's think about children work, and so on. So this responsibility, international responsibility of the states, this is in the moment not yet developed, and this is in the start. So we have now certain discussion points also in the law. I myself wrote some article on social responsibility some years ago. We had a seminar in Bandung on this. My idea is that we need I mentioned that before, that we need in the economy law, and for example also in the antitrust law, where we can allow certain collaborations or forbid certain collaborations, also because of certain issues for the social order and so on and so on. We should stop to focus only on the national territory, because we have, on one side, we have not a clear national territorial delimitation of the markets anymore. So we know there is a world market, and if Airbus and Boeing would make a fusion, then the European Union antitrust authority would forbid that, right? Because the market, the world market, is influenced, not only the European market. So we have a global economy, but on the other side, we don't take into account social aspects of the global market. Yeah, so a start would be, for example, a supply chain law, which we discuss now in Germany, which take into account how social responsible German companies produce in third world countries. So the companies must prove that they follow certain rules of responsibility, of, for example, avoid children work, certificate the production in these countries, how safe are the workers, where is the safety and the security, also insurance for the workers, even if produced in Bangladesh or in Africa. Yeah, and if not complying to this, and this is more than just corporate social responsibility, which is discussed in Asia very, very strongly. If not comply with this, there could be heavy penalty for this. How this will work, it's not clear. We have a strong opposition of the economy, of the business here, yeah, against this plan, and also the government is not that favorable, but it's forced to discuss that now a draft for this. So another aspect, maybe the shared financing aspect. If we talk about the vaccine, we have shared financing. We have financing from several governments. For example, Germany is financing 2 companies which develop vaccines and are in the last in this zone 3, which are in Germany. There's 2 German companies in this level already, and we finance that with a big amount of money. And also we have the financing I mentioned that, by the foundation of Bill Gates, and so on and so on. If there is a share financing, there is no reason for monopolizing the production to a certain country. So this on one side, egoistic financing, let's finance that for us, but multilateral financing may have the factual effect that we have an internationalization of this idea, of this health protection in this sense. And maybe we should support this multilateral financing. Maybe this is a way, a part of contracts or treaties, international treaties in the WTO. This is maybe a factual way to force the situation to be multilateral. Yeah, the point is that not every country can finance. So this is the disadvantage. So if, for example, Thailand is not financing that, then this group of states could say, yeah, then Thailand has no right to get that. Unfortunately, this is the case. But on the other side, we have blocks in European Union. The politic is more multilateral. We have now a speech of the leader of the Commission who said that this vaccine development, also if it's in the European Union, must be also take into account the supply for the third world countries and countries which are not having the power to develop this. Contrary to United States, we must wait what happened with the United States, but this is of course so this interactive aspect, factual financing, share financing, and on the other side, this social responsibility aspect should be discussed more in our countries and should be discussed, first of all, more in our universities. We should make more seminars on that. We should publish on that. We should make a propaganda on this aspect, because this aspect is very seldom mentioned by the leaders of the science. So it has only a chance to get into the politics if we propose this more and stronger. So this is I'm very fiery for this point. Did I forget something? No, I don't think so. This is, I think, more or less what I have to answer on this very intelligent question of you, Prof. Ida. Thank you.
But just to add one point, very interesting for you, Prof. Ida. Yeah. Thank you very much for your question. Is during the pandemic, the start of the pandemic in spring times, when Italy had a lot of deaf people, a really increase of so many people dying, the German government, under this German foreign trade law, prohibits to export ventilators to Italy, ventilation equipment, even in the European Union.
In the EU.
So it's only a very short way from, from free trade and from, the people who should vote for you in the next election.
And Prof. Ida, you talk about the international relation. Professor Naqib, we talk about WTO. Professor Bohne talk about EU. There's also the crisis in the EU. Yeah, so we must discuss about new dispute settlements in the EU. Maybe in my personal opinion, I don't know if Professor Bohne agree. In my personal opinion, the widening of the EU after the Cold War to East European countries and to a lot of countries which have maybe not this democratic tradition was a big mistake, because we have now really a lack of agreement in the EU. But this is not belonging only to the East European countries. We see also this difference between Germany and Austria already, and Germany and France has maybe an axe, but Germany and Austria, Germany and Denmark, Germany, Netherlands, not if it comes to the financing of the problems of the financial problems of the South European countries. I'm strongly in favor to support them. We cannot deny that we must support them, but there was a big discussion why we support Italy. Italy did not make good equilibrium in their financing, and now we must do that. This is a big problem. We see it now again with the refugees from Greece. That the majority of the population in Germany is in favor to take refugees from Greece, but only if the other countries also do so. But the other countries, many of the European countries, are not willing to take refugees, at least families or children from Greece. Germany is the country doing this. Then Austria does not want to do it, and Netherlands and so on. So we have this crisis same even in the supranational organization of the EU, which actually should act like one state, right?
Right. How is it, Prof. Ida? You like to say any words before I move to other questions? Maybe your last summarized comment to the comments.
Well, it's interesting how the world superpowers are, moving or working as far as getting access to the vaccines are concerned. I'm happy that you shared the experience of European Union, especially with the experience with Italy. But Malaysia is not a least developing country. We are supposed to move towards developed world. We are aiming for that. Yeah, but we are not enjoying some of the privileges that are given to the least developed countries. We have to pay normal price for a lot of the medicines, and I think even for some of the essential medicines that are being used now, we are paying on normal market licensing rules. So if you look at trade around the world, a lot of countries now spending more and more percentage of their GDP on essential medicines and COVID-19 measures. And as a result, you mentioned the problem with the migrant. The same thing in Malaysia as well. We can give free COVID-19 tests to our citizens, free COVID-19 treatment to our citizens, but we can't afford to do that to our migrant workers. And it's the same thing once we get hold of the vaccine, for example, which we are going to pay on market price. I'm not quite sure whether we're going to be readily giving that to our migrant workers, as well as, you know, whatever, you know, cities, foreign students that we have in our university. So it's all a matter of resources, and whether we like it or not, it goes back to nationalism, because resources are quite limited.
Oh, that's very interesting, Prof. Ida. You really, you could easily trigger another discussion from there. I remember what we experienced recently, that even foreigners did not get priority to pray in the mosque. To some people, it was a big deal, but I think it is okay. It is not a big deal. You know, we are given chance to rest more and do in different way. But that is really showing a lot of, you know, other things like nationalism and vis-a-vis the globalization, and being Malaysia being the country who is always having migrants, foreign migrants all the time, really something challenging for Malaysia in particular. Very interesting point of discussion. Thank you for everyone. Now, still we have few time. I have this question, I believe. Dr. Yazid would be just the right person to look at this question from Dr. Yasmira, I believe, from Universitas Pancabudi Medan. We actually have two questions from Universitas Pancabudi Medan, Indonesia. And Dr. Yasmira asked, please give information about crimes that occurred during COVID-19 pandemic in Malaysia and Germany. Perhaps this will give a little, you know, I mean, idea how complicated it can be, and not very, not directly related, but it is still related to see how the challenges are being faced by countries. Dr. Yazid, you might want to look into this question. Please unmute. Okay, you share the screen. Okay. Go ahead, unmute.
Can you hear my voice now?
Yes, very clearly.
Can you see the screen?
Yes, very clearly. Wow.
Okay, thank you for the question. Okay, first of all, we need to take note that when we talk about the coronavirus pandemic in Malaysia, we can associate the coronavirus pandemic to lockdown. So when we talk about crime, we must take note that there's a major implication of this lockdown to crime. For example, during the first lockdown in Malaysia, violent crimes recorded a 62.8% drop, while property crimes show a 55.5% decline. So overall, it's being reduced a lot. Violent crimes include murder, rape, gang robbery, while property crimes include house break-in, snatch, theft, and vehicle theft. For the second level of the movement control order, the lockdown, from the 1st April to 14 April, crimes in Kuala Lumpur recorded a 63% reduction, with violent crimes and property crimes dropping by 74% and 59% respectively, according to the head of police. We believe the drastic reduction of crimes in the city in Malaysia was due to more roadblocks and patrols during the lockdown. Of course, there's police everywhere. You cannot leave your house. So it's generally more difficult to commit crime during the coronavirus pandemic. So we can see a major reduction. That being said, I take note that in certain other countries, especially in Europe and also in United States, they have different type of crime during the coronavirus pandemic. one example of crimes in Europe and also United States during this period is people pretending to be police officer. They went to a house to try to cheat the elderly. Okay, try to cheat the elderly and all. So that's the one of the noted crime that happened in Europe and United States as well. The second one, the second type of crime that happened quite a lot we know in Europe. In Malaysia, I'm not sure to what extent, is about blackmail using revenge porn. The meaning is, you know, nowadays, because of the lockdown, people cannot just leave their house. So sometimes couples, they start sexting, these kind of things. The next thing they know, their former partner blackmail them. So there's a huge increase in reporting of cases related to this kind of revenge porn, which is a crime. Okay, thank you, Dr. Sonny.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Yazid. I might want to invite Prof. Bohne to comment on that.
Well, at the moment, you have especially increase of white-collar crime, of course, in the field of subsidies fraud, because there are a lot of measures from the government, billion and billion of euro are spent on all kind of supporting enterprises, but of course, that's a field where you have a lot of additional crime at the moment. And so it will be difficult to sanction it all after the pandemic. So a lot of them won't be, will fear any sanction to this white-collar crime. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. Bohne. If any of you were in our previous webinar, we had one discussion on data protection during pandemic. So we actually discussed, among others, actually, even though the violent crimes are dropping, see the decline, but we saw the increase of cyber-based crimes. Actually, cyber-based crime is, I think it's quite naturally happening because more people are flocking into the cyberspace and a lot more things being done by people online. And also I happened to write a short article about terrorism during pandemic in which, due to the increase of the people using the cyberspace, as well as the weakness of system, it somehow opens up some windows for cyber terrorists to make use and exploit these weaknesses. And we saw already few occasions of the misuse of cyberspace by terrorists or by people who want to target the critical information infrastructures. So that is just to add to that question. Well, we have to rush a little bit now. We have this question. I'd like perhaps Prof. Naqib to consider this. What will be the advice? Let me just get back to it. It was somewhere here. Okay, please give advice how developing country can survive a pandemic COVID-19. Perhaps Prof. Naqib, I'd like to gauge from you. How especially developing countries can survive the pandemic?
That's a very tough question.
You're being advisors now to developing countries.
This pandemic created a crisis not only for developing countries, but also developed and least developed countries. All countries around the world are affected by this pandemic. But what is needed actually, of course, there are countries in the developing world and as well as among the least developed countries who by themselves alone cannot address the challenges posed to them by this pandemic. What is needed is international cooperation to address this issue collectively. I mean, because human life, whether it is in developing country or whether it is in developed country or whether it is in least developed country, are important, is important. It has to be protected. I do come across a Facebook statement by one individual from a least developed country, which I don't have to mention the name of that country, stating that if you meet, he's asking his friends, if you meet anyone who has not got COVID-19, please convey my regard to him. What he meant by that is that all people in that country has been somehow affected. But what we have right now is official official estimate, that is 30 million over people. But in some countries, of course, especially in the least developed countries, where everybody got it, possibly, but not reported because they lack the necessary equipment to test the patients. So what is needed for me is international cooperation to address this issue, because this crisis poses a threat to human life everywhere, whether it is in developed country, developing country, or least developed countries. Thank you, Dr. Sonny. I hope I have addressed the issue, the question.
Thank you, Prof. Naqib. Wow. Having said that, we really we would love to have more discussions, and but then the time is against us now. I'd like to thank everyone. But by the way, I forgot to mention the question we discussed just now came from the Dean in Medan, Ibu Suryanita, Universitas Pancabudi Medan. Thank you for joining us. So with that question, I guess we will stop the discussions. And I believe each and everyone has got a very interest or being provoked with these interesting thoughts and a lot of more ideas and points of discussion for further maybe for opportunities in future if we do have, or otherwise you might want to initiate discussions of your own. And I believe each speakers here would be happy to be involved in future discussions as well. I'm happy to also note that so far we have more than 45 participants, which is good because considering the time here in IIUM, which is in the mid-semester break or mid-semester term, we don't have a lot of people here, so we cannot bank on our students, but we do have few students around. Thank you for being here. We do have former students, our alumni, for example, those Dr. Muazu, who joined from Nigeria. I believe he just joined us, but it is good signal that you are being with us here and continue to connect. Yeah.
May I just add one small thing?
Yes, actually,
just one idea.
Stefan, just before we finish, I'd like to welcome each speaker, to give his last comment. Yes, this closing statement. Okay, we can start now.
Just to add to what you said, maybe we can think about a share publication, maybe a collecting short articles collecting this about this topic for having a resume of our seminar later, that anyone maybe gives short, not long articles, so that we have maybe some publication on that, bringing together our views from today. Just an idea.
I think it's a very good idea. I hope we can carry it on. At least from the 4 speakers, you have very beautiful points to write and to take further to publications. We are looking forward to that, to doing that. And Prof. Ida, you might want to join in contributing some thoughts, or anyone for that matter. Right. Can I welcome each and every speaker to give his last statement relating to the topic?
Can I say something? The last word? May I say?
Session.
Yeah. Dr. Sonny?
Yes, please. Please.
Yeah. So the crisis created by the COVID-19 is very, very serious. It is affecting human health and human life and human well-being everywhere, in every corner of the world. It has to be addressed. What is needed is international cooperation. States should avoid excessive nationalism and focus on internationalization. No nation is an island by itself. We need to help each other in this time of crisis. That is the parting message from me.
Great. Thank you so much, Prof. Naqib. Prof. Stefan, please.
Yeah, I see this crisis in the same way. I see it also positive. Everything negative has also something positive in it. So I think we can use this crisis as a warning. It shows us what can happen if we go back and are anachronistic. Nationalism for me personally, and this is I'm always convicted since my youth, I'm convicted that nationalism is anachronistic. So we should take it as a warning, and we should take the chance to develop maybe creative methods and creative solutions to reform certain things. So think about really alternatives like paradiplomacy supporting this, or think about a more collaborative and more international social responsible approach of the economic law. And as I said before, we should use exactly these forums, also with your university, to discuss this and to develop something maybe together. To make a school out of that. Yeah, so this is my point, and of course the people can also learn a lot. We see a lot of new methods, Zoom meetings, home working, and these things we develop now because we need to develop that, and that is also a chance. So we should use it. Thank you.
Thank you for a very beautiful and peaceful message, Prof. Stefan. Dr. Yazid, please.
Okay, thank you everyone. I just want to add something. I believe that this coronavirus pandemic is a test to see whether globalization is practical or not, and whether globalization can survive or not. A simple example, we can see before this, because of globalization, we have a lot of foreign direct investment. For example, country like China giving a lot of funding to other countries. A simple example we can see in Sri Lanka. China give a lot of funding for the development of the port. But later, when Sri Lanka government faced difficulty in repayment, the main port was confiscated by China. And now we are seeing other problem. For example, like it was very recently reported that the Maldives government is facing problem to repay back China. Before this, China give a lot of funding, a lot of loan to the Maldives government under the name of globalization, financing infrastructure and all that. Now, because of COVID-19, we can see that there's almost a complete halt to tourism. So government country like Maldives, they cannot make money from tourism because of the coronavirus pandemic. But at the same time, they suffer this very heavy burden in the form of debt to certain country like China. So I believe the way government or countries react to this coronavirus pandemic will determine whether globalization is here to stay, or whether countries should start going into nationalism, protectionism, and that kind of things. In the end, it depends on our attitude. Thank you.
Well, that is heavy for a closing statement. Thank you, Dr. Yazid. Perhaps another thing is that this is also a test to call perhaps for another thought of rather than deconstructing the globalization that we do have, but what about reconstructing it? What about remapping? Now we can see options. US is not always leading. Well, they are leading now also in the death and the infection, but we see alternatives eventually. So perhaps also to reconstruct the globalization as it is. Thank you. And last but not least, of course, Prof. Bohne.
Yes, thank you very much. I also agree, of course, 100% with my colleague Naqib. And the crisis is like a burning glass for the problems that already existed. That means, so perhaps now we can see more clearly and cooperate more easily. And that means that societies have to show the decision makers that people are not stupid and know who is pursuing which goals. And probably something good can come out of the crisis at the end, hopefully.
Thank you, Prof. That is our discussion this morning. It's very fruitful, very enriching, and I think it is really provoking us to do more and to read more and perhaps to discuss more and write more, inshallah. For all the audience, I'd like to also inform you that we have the last part of this webinar series with the German schools, the German universities, our partners. We already so far done with 3 webinars. The last one, I mean for this series, would be done somewhere in the 2nd week of October, preferably or rather tentatively it will be on Friday 23rd of October, where we will discuss about market, competition and innovation post-pandemic era. Yeah, the speakers are actually with us. Inshallah, we'll be speaking for this last part of this webinar. Professor Stefan Koos and Professor Ida Madiha will be speaking from areas related to this topic, market, competition, innovation. We would welcome, we would invite you to join our webinar in October, inshallah. Also, I'd like to thank everyone. I notice here the institutions, many of them are actually our partners, our existing partners, and also those who have had connection with us from Universiti Pembangunan Pancabudi Medan. Thank you. Universitas Muhammadiyah Purwokerto, Universitas Muhammadiyah Tangerang, yeah. Then Universitas Bandar Seri Begawan, ya, Kupu, thank you, Brunei. We have University Malaysia Sabah, yeah, and then let me just go down and see USU, Universitas Sumatera Utara, Universitas Muhammadiyah Cirebon, Sekolah Tinggi Darun Najah, Bogor and Jakarta. Then we have from EIN Cirebon. A lot of other newcomers, I think, for this webinar. And Universiti Pembangunan, already done. Universitas Pasundan, thank you. Bandung, ya, Bandung. Then UIN Jakarta, and then BINUS. Pak Stefan, you know your friend Dr. Abdul Rashid from BINUS.
Yes, I know him very well. Hello.
Then we have from Nigeria, I believe, Umaru Musa University, and also from Bogor. Next is from Batam, yeah, University of Batam. Sekolah Tinggi Al-Mujaddid, yeah, somewhere in Indonesia, I believe. Thank you. We really have good turn out this time. we look forward to having you again, yeah, in future webinars, inshallah. And this is not the only series we have. We will have more series of seminar or webinar with AIKOL partners and other institutions. Thank you again, and thank you for those who have filled up the form. We shall get back to you with the electronic certificate. That will be all for today. Sorry, cannot really attend to all those notes and questions. We do have few others, but we welcome you to connect with us one way or another after this program. Thank you again for the speakers. Thank you all profs, colleagues, students, and all the visitors, guests from other institutions. I shall finish here and let us recite with Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Thank you again, and then from my part, that is all. Yeah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sir.
Who is that? Umar.
Yeah, I'm here in Bogor.
Where are you now?
I'm in
Bogor.
Puncak.
Mashallah.
Puncak.
You're still stranded in Bogor, yeah? Inshallah.
No, I'm in Puncak now. Right now I'm in Puncak.
So do you want to stay forever there, or you still want to get back to Malaysia?
No, I will get back to you soon, inshallah.
Thank you. I'm looking forward, my brother. So hopefully everything goes well with you, yeah?
Okay, okay. See you.
Terima kasih bapak-bapak, ibu-ibu yang sudah gabung dari Indonesia.
Sama-sama.
Dr. Muazu, are you there? Can we hear your voice? It's not there. Thank
Sir,
you.
can you show us the slide, please?
Say again, Umar.
How about the slide? The slide.
Slide. I haven't got from the authors yet, from the speakers. Let me get from them. And if any of you wishes to get a slide, please email me at sonny@IIUM, SONNY @iium.edu.my. Yeah, Pak Urip. Terima kasih, Pak Urip. Yeah. Where are you, Yaya? Yaya Jalo.
Hello, Mr. Sonny.
Yes, Pak Urip.
Will you meet again? Maybe October?
Yeah, I'm here. Assalamualaikum, doctor. Yeah, I was listening, you know.
Terima kasih, Pak Urip. Sudah gabung.
Ya, terima kasih. Ya. Oktober ya?
Yeah,
Ya, tanggal 23. Tanggal 23.
We really enjoyed the conference, you know.
Yes,
Don't forget, tell me.
Oh, yeah, Pak Urip. We will be connecting with you through the email addresses that you provide us, inshallah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Sonny,
hello. Where are you?
Yeah,
Can you see the picture?
I just came to IIUM just now. I'm working on my research. So I was with the conference. The conference is very informative. We benefited a lot, you know. We wish for more.
We will
provide
more, inshallah, because this is all what we can. You know, we cannot do the conference physically. So we already have in plan some webinars in future. At least a few months. Few seminars in every month. Inshallah, we will let you know. So just watch our IIUM website sometime, or you from my broadcast. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. We love you. Thank you. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. Jumpa Barak. Ayo, Umar. I can see you now, Umar.
Can you see the picture? It's very good.
Really?
Yeah. In Puncak.
Now, is there
the price?
Yeah, of course. Puncak is very nice place, man.
Especially now, the price for the villa is cheap now due to coronavirus.
Yeah.
So that's why
I took one of the time. It's the best time to go there and stay. Yeah. Also, people are nice, man, over there, and food.
Yeah, but the problem is it's not good.
What is that?
The internet.
Okay. Well, you have to work it out.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for
See you,
being
inshallah.
joining us. Thank you. Dr. Muaz, are you there? From Nigeria, mashallah. Dr. Muaz, can you hear me? I can't hear you, man. I can't hear you. But anyway, thank you for joining us from Nigeria. Looking forward to speaking with you further on any, projects, research, Let us reconnect. Pak Zainal, terima kasih Pak Zainal.
Sama-sama.
Dari
Insyaallah
mana
nanti
Pak Zainal?
kita terus. Muhammadiyah Jakarta.
Oh, UMJ, Masya Allah, tidak disebut tadi. Mohon maaf, saya lihat yang di formulir tadi. Ya, alhamdulillah UMJ. Terima kasih. Kemarin baru ngobrol sama Pak Sukardi ya, ada ya Dr. Sukardi ya?
Pak Sukardi ada.
Pak Sukardi. Pak
Dari
Rektor
Fakultas
gimana
Hukumnya.
Pak? Pak Rektor gimana? Sehat Pak Rektor?
Alhamdulillah sehat sudah aktif.
Alhamdulillah. Baik, syukurlah kalau gitu.
Iya. Terima kasih.
Baik Pak Zainal, terima kasih sudah gabung ya.
Ya.
Nah, baik. Kalau gitu saya tutup Bapak-bapak, Ibu-ibu. Izin saya tutup ruang webinar ini. Terima kasih sekali lagi ya. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Hello? Hello. Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor Sonny. It is quite a pleasure to be with you and the other participants at this very moment. It is a pleasure. Thank you very much, sir. I'm okay, sir.